Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen here with life coach Cindy Chavez. Today is Wednesday, August the 21st, 2019. It is 4 p.m. in New York, and that's 1 p.m. Los Angeles time. And that would make it 9 p.m. London time, and I believe 5 a.m. in Tokyo, 6 a.m. in Sydney. But wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy, and happy Neville Day! It's
Happy Neville Day!
Here on LOA Today, we get to do Neville Goddard every Wednesday. So we're glad that you're able to join us. And we are doing his magnum opus, Law and the Promise. Yeah. And it has proven to be the equal of every other book of his that we've done. We haven't done all of them yet, but I think we've done, 6 of them out of the group, something like that.
Yeah, we've done most of them, actually. Yeah. And the thing I think is cool about this book, it's interesting that you use that word magnum opus, because you know how we've talked about, like, when we started, we didn't do them in order, but we have read his earliest books, and then this one, which was, I think, one of the latest books, and seeing this sort of evolution of his teaching, seeing how his teaching developed and his ideas developed and things like that. And what's cool about this is that not only are these ideas, like, fully developed, I think, maybe for him. Right. But that also, it's full of letters from people who have followed him in real time back then and listened to his teachings and then applied them to their lives and had results, and here are the results. So along with the sort of fully developed ideas are also these wonderful results. And I think that's such a great combination.
Absolutely. Well, plus we love stories here on LOA Today, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about telling LOA stories. So that's what makes this a fun section, a fun book to be doing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's funny, too, is that sometimes I have to remind myself that this was written, like 50 years ago or something, because...
Yeah, 49, I think. 48.
I'm like, wait, what?
Well, when they talk about prices, and the prices don't match up to anything that we know today.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of a clue.
Yeah, but it's fun, and it's, energy hasn't changed, right?
This is true.
Things have changed. There's a concept that, the only thing that's constant is changed. But energy and the way energy works, I don't think that's really changed, at least,
Probably not. No. I mean, entropy is going to be involved, and, expansion. But the energy itself is, like you say, it's energy. So
So these methods, even though they were developed, some of us, it'll be before our time. Not before my time, but I was really much smaller. But the methods still work.
Yes.
Still work. We still have, access to our own imagination and our own energy field, and we can still do all this stuff that we're reading about. So
it's funny, on the topic of price, I was speaking with Alex and Bill G on Wednesday, or on Tuesday rather, and the topic came up of college tuition pricing.
Oh. And
I was commenting how my entire student loan after 4 years of college when I graduated was like $7,500, and Alex was practically having an apoplectic fit when she heard that.
I remember my youngest sister, I remember she wanted to be a doctor, and she ended up instead choosing to be a nurse. Now, she's awesome. She's a trauma RN that flies around in a helicopter rescuing people. So, she's got it going on. But she said, I realized that I would be graduating from school with no job yet, with over, it was 100,000 or more in debt. And she said, I just couldn't, and that was years ago too, right? So she just couldn't do it. So my thing is now with all these, in politics, where you keep hearing these people that are pitching what they want to do if they get in office, and, getting rid of the student debt is one of the things.
Oh yeah, that's a big
topic. I keep joking because I actually have a student loan, and I'm like,
do you really? Oh wow.
What, that I owe $6 more than what?
Yeah, you just paid about $500 million people very jealous because their student loan isn't just $6.
No, well, mine isn't either. But the point I'm making, it's finally getting to where it's very small. But I'm probably going to keep paying it until it's almost paid off, and then they'll say everyone's student debts are wiped clean.
Yeah, right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, actually, that was, I won't even name names, but within the extended family, that was an issue because there are two brothers, one of whom got his debt wiped out, or part of his debt wiped out because of something. I'm not sure, some way that particular loan was set up, and his brother didn't get it, and his brother makes less money, and he was so upset.
Oh, yeah, right? Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
To me, all it does is just keep pointing to how important it is to stay in alignment, because the more you stay in alignment, more good things happen. And you don't have to track all that stuff. And we love to track it. We love to tell the stories of them because
we love to track. We love to track. We love to make spreadsheets.
We do. Yes. Often to our detriment.
I'm not a spreadsheet person, but my husband loves to make spreadsheets out of everything. So yeah, I get it. So if I want to make sure that we do our announcements before we dive in, because I know how important that is.
Very important. So, yes, we want everybody who is listening to be a subscriber. And fortunately, most listeners are subscribers. And we've been talking about that a lot recently, that roughly 85 to 90% of our listeners are subscribers. And we love you. We love every one of you.
Yay.
But to the other 10 or 15%, what are you waiting for? Come on.
We love you too. Please subscribe.
Yeah, we'll love you even more. No, that's not true. But the fact is, you'll get every single episode that comes automatically directly to your phone every time that we publish. And that's the advantage of subscribing. And it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. So, why not do it? And very simple to do. We are now on almost all of the podcast platforms you can imagine. I mean, we're on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. We're on Pandora. We're in iHeartRadio. I mean, just name them all. And we're like on at least 95% of them. But if you just can't find us there, just go to the homepage for our website, loatoday.net, and right at the top of the page, you will find instructions so that you can become a subscriber. And actually, it's pretty simple. You just click, and you're done. And then once you're a subscriber, make sure, of course, that you share the fact with others so that other people can get their daily doses of happy. And take advantage of the fact that we live stream on YouTube, because that way you can actually see faces as we're doing this. And we also love it. We sometimes get people who drop by to listen to us while we're doing the live stream, and we get people asking us questions, sharing comments. Yes. We try to share those comments on the show as much as we can. So, yeah, by all means, join us on the live streams. We love it.
I was going to say, that's the best thing about the live stream is that we can answer questions. And yeah, I love that. I love when we get questions.
Yeah, we haven't had any Neville questions lately. We need some Neville questions. So, Wednesday live streams and join us.
Well, I think that's because a lot of the people that follow us for Neville, and I mean, because we have people that specifically listen and love hearing Neville, and I think that, maybe they're getting it. They don't have questions because.
Well, I mean, I have realized that for quite some time. We have very, very sharp listeners. We don't get a lot of the beginners. We get more of the experienced LOAers, the experienced deliberate creators. And I mean, when they do ask a question, it's like, whoa, what a great question that one was.
Yeah, but whatever your questions are, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're just starting out and this is all completely new to you, or if you're an old Neville pro or a law of attraction pro and this stuff is elementary to you and you can teach us something, it doesn't matter where you are, just like we'd love to hear from you through, email contact forms or through the live stream questions or however you get a hold of us. Like, we love hearing from you and hearing your ideas and your questions and your comments, because I think that always helps us make a better show. So
absolutely. Well, it's also how I do my personal growth. I mean, I've learned a lot just by talking to you and to the life coaches that I do this with, but also very often the commentary from the listeners. I learned from that too. Yeah. We all benefit. Everybody benefits, just by being part of it.
That's how this all works.
That's right.
We all work together. So.
Well, and by the way, if your pixels look any different today, I'm going through a different internet provider. So just wanted to let you know, if the picture looks any different, now you know why. It's because of that. No, I'm kidding. There's not going to be.
I was going to say, no, it looks.
No, I'm just being silly.
Well, we're going through, like Walt said, Neville Goddard's Magnus Opum, The Law and the Promise. It's a wonderful book we just started out. If you're just starting out, you can certainly catch up because we're only halfway through the third chapter.
Right.
But we just read a story last week about a woman that went on a date. And, of course, this was before all of the wonderful technology that we have now. Like
right.
I was telling the story. The night I met my husband, we talked for maybe an hour at an event we were at. And, you know, I left the event and got home and saw that he had given me a friend request on Facebook, right? That didn't happen 50 years ago. And we read this story about this woman that she wasn't even sure that this blind date that she'd been on, she wasn't even sure he would remember her name. I don't know what that says, but she began to imagine that she was married to him. And, of course, you know, the success story happened. They did get married. But I wanted to start a little after that while Neville is commenting on the results.
Right.
And he says, by using her imagination radically instead of conservatively. And that's been going around and around in my head because probably the main reason, because I often talk to clients and anybody that I'm teaching law of attraction to or any kind of, you know, improvement about radical responsibility, which is the idea that you're willing to take responsibility for everything you experience.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's not, some people call that like blame the victim. Like they say, oh, you're sick or you've been assaulted or, well, it's your fault, you created it. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that when things happen that are uncomfortable or even horrible, that we take responsibility for how we experience it, for how we deal with it after the fact, for what we do with it. That's the radical responsibility. So Neville over here uses that word, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, because he says she used her imagination radically instead of conservatively.
I love that.
By building her world out of pure dreams of fancy, rather than using images supplied by memory, she brought about the fulfillment of her dream. And I was asking myself, how am I using my imagination? Am I using it radically, or am I most of the time just using it conservatively?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because literally, without having looked at what we're going to read today, that's the topic I was thinking about when I woke up this morning. Seriously.
We're in alignment here.
We are. And it's exactly what I was thinking about. I wasn't calling it radically or conservatively. I was thinking about it in terms of strongly or weakly, but it pretty much amounts to the same thing. And I was asking myself, okay, there are certain things that I do as part of my daily routine. I mean, there are certain asks that I have out there, certain longer term things that I didn't want to be longer term. I want them to be, right away, but, just because of my own resistance levels, they were longer term. And I'm thinking, what can I do to speed that up? I know some things to speed that up. I do a show about this. I pick things up along the way. So I had to be able to figure this part out.
Not your first rodeo, Walt.
Yeah, that's right. So, I'm thinking about it and I'm saying, how much do I really do the part about assuming the feeling? How much do I really take on that feeling? Do I, oh yeah, I kind of feel it. Or do I dive in and feel it in a really, really big way? Yeah. And that's exactly what I thought about. And I realized I need to spend more on the second kind. The kind of diving in and feeling it in a really big way to the point where I'm living it internally. Yeah. I haven't done enough of that.
Yeah, we talked about one time this idea that our wishing faculty is a commitment phobe.
Yeah.
Right? I really like German cars a lot. And I see a Porsche drive by and say, ooh, I wish I had that car.
Mm.
And then what? 30 seconds later, I'm thinking of something else. And I don't think about that car again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not radical imagination.
No, that's radical avoidance.
Well, that's just, distracted by a shiny object. Oh, I want one of those. Oh, that would be good. And it's not coming into my experience because I'm not putting a whole lot of focus on it. And like
Abraham tells us it's got to be a minimum of 14 to 17 seconds before even you get another thought, let alone the thing.
Right. So the idea that you brought up, that's what we're talking about today, about using the imagination and not just using images that are supplied by memory, but tapping into it in a deeper way to where we're feeling the feelings. So Neville goes on to say that common sense would have used images supplied by her memory and thereby perpetuated the fact of lack in her life. Imagination created what she desired out of a dream of fancy. And by that, I think he's really just saying this was something she didn't have yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a dream. It wasn't her looking back on the one date that they had had and remembering having a date.
And that phrase there, dream of fancy, right. That phrase is exactly what you described when you said, oh, I love that Porsche. That's all it was. It was just a dream of fancy that just kind of flitted past. It didn't stick around. You didn't stay with it very long. It just kind of thought, there it is.
But she stayed with it. And that's what, in the story we read last week, that every night, she was imagining this. Yep. And he says that everyone must live wholly on the level of imagination, and it must be consciously and deliberately undertaken. And then he quotes from Shakespeare, lovers and madmen have such seething brains, such shaping fantasies that apprehend more than cool reason over comprehends. So there's an idea here. Notice that he's making a juxtaposition between shaping fantasies and using cool reason.
No kidding.
Not going to be logic that gets us there. Logic is always a thing that's trying to, we have an intuitive idea about something. We have a desire that pops up, and then we have logic that tries to talk us out of it. So
one thing that occurs to me is that the more, I've never been much into Shakespeare, but the more that I've been exposed to Shakespeare, the more awed I am by just how much he really understood. Just truly amazing how much that man understood.
Yeah. And I like the quotes that Neville has been pulling in different places in this particular book, because some of these quotes are so deep and wow, I didn't, different poets and philosophers and really, really good stuff.
Yeah.
So Neville says, if our time of revision be well spent. Remember, we talked about this last week, revising, going back, changing the past. The name of the chapter is Turn the Wheel Backward.
Right.
If our time of revision be well spent, we need not worry about results. Our fondest hopes will be realized. Then he quotes Frank Kendon from the Timepiece. Art thou real, Earth? Am I? In whose dream do we exist? Mm-hmm. There is no inevitable permanence in anything. Both past and present continue to exist only because they are sustained by imagining on some level or other. And a radical transformation of life is always possible by man revising the undesirable part of it. So now we're going to go into another letter that he received. And I think you're going to like this one.
I always like his stories.
In his letter, Mr. R.S. questions this subject of influence. During your current series of lectures, trouble developed with collections on one of my trust deeds. The security, a house and lot, was neglected and run down. The owners were apparently spending their money in bars, while their two little girls, aged 9 and 11, were noticeably uncared for. However, forgetting appearances, I began to revise the situation. In my imagination, I drove my wife past the property and said to her, "Isn't the yard beautiful? It's so neat and well cared for. Those people really show their love for their home. This is one trust deed we will never have to worry about." I would see the house and lot as I wanted to see it, a place so lovely it gave me a warm glow of pleasure. Every time the thought of this property came to me, I repeated my imaginal scene. That would be pretty hard to do, don't you think?
Well, actually, there's a topic I want to bring up when we're done with the story that ties directly into that. So, okay, yeah, good. But go ahead.
Remember that.
Oh, I will.
Okay. He goes on to say, after I'd been practicing this revision for some time, the woman who lived in the house had an automobile accident. While she was in the hospital, her husband disappeared. Mm-hmm. The children were cared for by neighbors, and I was tempted to visit the mother in the hospital to reassure her of assistance if necessary. But how could I, when my imaginary scene implied that she and her family were happy, successful, and obviously contented? So I did nothing but my daily revision. A short while after leaving the hospital, the woman and her two daughters disappeared also. Payments were sent in on the property, and a few months later she reappeared with a wedding certificate and a new husband. At this writing, all payments are right up to date. The 2 little girls are obviously happy and well cared for, and a room has been added to the property by the owners, giving our trust deed additional security. It was mighty nice to solve my problem without threats, unkind words, eviction, or worry about the little girls. But was there something in my imagining that sent that woman to the hospital?
Yeah, so many great things going on here, including that last question, because it's a good question to raise.
Yeah.
The other thought that was coming through my mind is it actually got kind of spurred by something I saw on Facebook. Somebody objected to somebody else's post, and I guess the post was about, oh, geez, I don't remember what the post was about. But anyway, this person was answering the post, whatever it was. I don't remember what the topic was. And the person said, I really think the most important thing that could possibly happen in life is that we always tell the truth. And as soon as they wrote that and I saw it, I said to myself, this is a deliberate creation law of attraction Facebook page. Okay, which means you have to amend the truth. You have to change that truth, which means at the moment that you're telling it, you're contradicting what your perceptual reality is telling you. So is that no longer telling the truth? And if so, how do you reconcile that?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm doing some scripting, literal scripting right now, and outlines for some teaching videos that I'm going to be doing about Hermetic principles, magic, alchemy, and relationships, and just general, life coachy kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of my things, though, is, are you telling the truth? Mm-hmm. Right? Because so many times we don't tell the truth. And I don't mean about making big lies that are going to hurt anybody. I'm talking about small things where we're not telling the truth about our own experience or about how we feel. And I think that that's important to be able to do a revision, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Right? Like a lot of times we don't want to admit that we are feeling uncomfortable about something. Or there are all those lists of emotions that we put into the bad emotion category. So mm-hmm. we don't want to admit, oh, no, I'm never angry. I actually had a client tell me one time that they never get angry about anything. And their homework, you need to get in a journal and really get angry. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we all have those emotions. And if we shut them down and don't tell the truth about them, we can't move past them and alchemize them into a better place. So I have like little mixed feelings about the idea, but I totally know what you're saying. And yes, you could never script anything if you thought that that was lying. I just don't think that that's lying.
I realize that a lot of it has to do with playing a word game.
Yes.
To me, the difference is the difference between not telling the truth and deceiving. Because to deceive means to pull the wool over, to try to make somebody think that something that is one way is actually another way, and to twist their minds around and so forth. Or even to do that to yourself. Like you said, you have this feeling of anger, but, oh no, I'm determined that I don't feel any anger, so I'm going to mask that anger off and pretend that it's not there. It's a form of deception.
But
and
see,
deception
this guy,
is more of a problem.
Even in his story, right, he says, we drove by, and the house was run down, right? So It's like, there's the truth right there, the truth, right? That's I mean, he's telling what he saw. It didn't make him happy to see the house run down. Right? And what else? The other part of the truth is here is a person, and I would be right here too, because I don't think this is really turns anybody on. It's like, I don't want to have harsh words. I don't want to start with the eviction notices. I don't want to go down that road.
Right.
So the truth is, the people are neglecting the property as well as the children. My property is not being paid. It's all run down. That's all truth. Mm-hmm. The other part of the truth is, I don't want to deal with this in a way that's really uncomfortable for everybody. So how am I going to deal with it? I'm going to see a different picture. And this is truth as well. What is the truth? The truth is that when I drive by, in my imagination, I'm imagining it looking the way I want it to look. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any lies going on here, right? But I see a full picture of the truth. The truth of what's going on in reality, and the truth of what I want to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
think that's true.
Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to summarize it, again, playing the word games. Deception is the thing that I try to avoid doing because I don't like the idea. If this is me, this is my own choice. I don't like the idea of deceiving somebody else. I don't like the idea of somebody else trying to deceive me. I like them working with me rather than against me and vice versa. But I also appreciate that truth is more accurately understood as perception. What do I perceive? Right. That is what is my truth.
Right.
And my truth can change based on how I change my perception because I am in control of my perception at all times.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Exactly it. Exactly it. So when I understand truth in terms of perception and what perception is, now truth all of a sudden falls into a nice alignment and everything starts to make sense.
Yeah.
When I try to turn it into an objective truth, which is based on the idea of not one particular perception, but sort of like this omnipresent perception, which I've never been able to define because it doesn't make any sense to me. But when you try to look at it from that objective perspective, that's where truth starts to get really, really sticky.
Well, and what's interesting here is, and what I'm really interested in hearing what Neville says is that this guy recognizes the power of his imagination and what he created here, and then gets concerned that his sent somebody to the hospital.
Right.
So.
And I want to answer that. I think we should address that point because I think it's a very important point. A lot of people get worried about treating deliberate creation as if you could do it like you were doing. I don't want to misuse the term black magic, like you're casting evil spells or something like that. And whenever I hear somebody talk about that, I realize that they don't fully grasp what the attract part means in law of attraction. Because it's not the law of repulsion. It's not the law of throwing lightning bolts.
Yeah.
It's the law of attraction. So that's what you attract to yourself.
Yeah.
And you really can't attract a negative. You can only attract stuff. That's why the universe doesn't understand the word no. You can either you can attract lack, but you can't attract no anger. You can't. There's no way to attract no anger. Because the moment that you're doing that, you're attracting anger.
Well, and there's the idea of degrees and polarity as well. So everything contains its opposite. So having to be comfortable with all of it, right, is where the power is. And so many people are so not willing to do that. Let's see what he says to this man. He says, any imaginal activity acquiring, because this is directly dealing with the man's question about, did I do this? Did I send this woman to the hospital?
A very valid question, yeah.
Right. Neville says any imaginal activity requiring intensity through our concentrated attention to clarity of the end desired, tends to overflow into regions beyond where we are. But we must leave it to take care of such imaginal activity itself. Mm-hmm. It's marvelously resourceful in adapting and adjusting means to realize itself. Once we think in terms of influence, rather than of clarity of the end desired, the effort of imagination becomes an effort of will, and the great art of imagining is perverted into tyranny. That's what you were talking about a second ago.
Right. Yeah.
The buried past usually lies deeper than our surface mind can plumb. But fortunately for this lady, she remembered and proved that the made past can also be unmade through revision. So now we'll get to another story. But I think this was really interesting because Neville's sort of saying, look, when you are using your imagination in as a way that's through such concentrated attention to a certain clarity of an end result, that energy is going to overflow into other regions, but it will take care of itself. And it kind of reminds me of, well, two things. One, the idea of good luck, bad luck. We've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. And not to go into a lot of time with it, but pretty much anything that you can see in your life today that's really great and working perfectly and a big joy for you, if you trace it back, you'll end up at something that really wasn't working very well and was not bringing you a lot of joy. And that is life. There's an ebb and a flow where we have contrast all the time. Mm-hmm. And out of contrast comes the things we're looking for, the things we desire. That's how desire, becomes manifest. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we have to go through some contrast. It doesn't matter what a great conscious creator you become, contrast is still going to happen.
Well, plus,
you become
that's part of the reason we're here. I mean,
right.
It actually wouldn't be worthwhile to be here if we didn't dip our toes in the contrast every once in a while.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so on to the next letter. Oh, I love this story. For 39 years, I had suffered from a weak back. The pain would increase and decrease, but would never leave me completely.
I've often wondered with some of these older stories, before the modern medical technology terms came into place, what would this get labeled with today? Would this be a slip disc? Would this be some other thing? I don't know what it would be, but yeah.
I don't know. I mean, so many, and it's interesting, so many different things can cause back pain, right?
Sure.
And referred pain, and, then you go off into the energetic kind of the Louise Hay realm of pain, where she's connecting every pain we ever have to some emotional thing, and like lower back pain is always connected to money. So there's all these things.
Yep.
And we don't know with this, but this person says the pain would increase and decrease, but would never leave completely. The condition had progressed to the point where I used medical treatment almost constantly. So I don't know what that means either, but it could mean drugs, pain medicine, chiropractic. I don't know. The doctor would put the hip right for the moment, but the pain simply would not go away.
That sounds chiropractic.
It does. One night I heard you speak of revision and wondered to myself if a condition of almost 40 years could be revised. I had remembered that at the age of 3 or 4 years, I had fallen backward from a very high swing and had been quite ill at that time because of a serious hip injury. From that time on, I had never been completely free from pain and had paid many a dollar to alleviate the condition to no avail. This year, during the month of August, the pain had become more intense, and one night I decided to test myself and attempt to revise that ancient accident which had been the cause of so much distress and pain and costly medical fees most of my adult life. If you hear that rumble,
you have a little storm coming through.
Thunder. Many nights passed before I could feel myself back to the age of childhood play. That's something to pay attention to in this story. It took him a while to get to the place, but he kept going for it. Every night he kept trying to feel himself back to the age of childhood play.
Right.
But I succeeded. One night I actually felt myself on that swing, feeling the rush of wind as the swing rose higher and higher. As the swing slowed down, I jumped forward, landing solidly and easily on my feet. In the imaginal action, I ran to my mother and insisted that she come watch what I could do. I did it again, jumping down from the swing and landing safely on my 2 feet. I repeated this imaginal act over and over until I fell asleep in the doing of it.
Very cool. I like the cleverness of including, I think it's her mother in the scene so that she could keep playing out the scene and keep herself interested enough to stay in it. That was a great idea to do that.
Yes. Within 2 days, the pain in my back and hip began to recede, and within 2 months, pain no longer existed for me. Wow. A condition that had plagued me for more than 39 years, that had cost a small fortune in attempted cure, was no more. You know what's so interesting? The initials are LH. I don't think it was Louise Hay, but
that's true.
It came to mind at the beginning of the reading, and then I looked down, wait, was it her? So very interesting, and it reminds me of what I just did with my son who had gotten in a bike wreck. He had missed the landing on his bike, and he had hurt his foot, and I had him imagine sticking the landing. He said, wow. Just keep imagining yourself going over the jump and sticking the landing. Every night when you're going to sleep, just imagine yourself over and over. Because he said, I've done this jump so many times, and I never missed the landing. I don't know what happened. And he sent me a text about 3 days afterwards, because he could not walk on the foot. He sent me a text and said, unbelievably fast healing, and was back to work the 4th day.
Wow.
So it's kind of funny. It's the same type of thing. It's like a miss the landing kind of thing.
Anyone who's experienced using this kind of technique in order to heal yourself and gotten fast healing, there are two things that I find that happened with me. One is you're amazed at it. You're amazed at how quickly it healed. But the other thing is, despite the fact that you have this experience, and I experienced it and I know it's real, I'll still find ways to doubt it. Those are the two things that amaze me. On the one hand, it was so quick, and on the other hand, I still doubt it. It's like, whoa.
Well, that's kind of human nature, right? Because we have in our mind all of these set points, I guess, things that we consider normal, right? Like we say, there's a saying about a head cold that says, it's 3 days coming, 3 days with you, 3 days going.
Oh.
Right? I mean, we have these little ideas. It's like this. We do the same thing with aging. People have certain years in their mind where they think, oh, that's what, like my eye doctor was always so shocked that I didn't need reading glasses. Well, because I was a certain age, and for sure I need reading glasses, and I didn't need reading glasses. But all of those come in through ideas we hear from other people, from doctors, from whatever. And I think sometimes we're not even really conscious of them. We just have all these ideas of what certain things mean. And so, that's the allocation of meaning. Like, we get to decide what that means. But there's still part of that. That's that logical brain that argues with us, right? We're like, can't believe how fast it's healed. I'm all healed up. And the logical brain's like, yeah, you're probably not really.
Or you didn't actually do it. It just kind of happened. It was going to happen anyway. Whatever.
I always say, if it's that idea of like, oh, well, this would have happened anyway. I go, okay. If I'm creating everything, then what's the difference how I did it? All right. Okay.
That's good. That's a good response. I like that. That's a great example of how you talked about responsibility early on, and how it's all about what responsibility we're going to take and literally how we're going to respond, which is the root of responsibility. People don't think about it that way. Like you said, we tend to think about it in terms of blame, and that's really not what responsibility is. No. Responsibility has nothing to do with blame. It has to do with responding.
Right.
And how you're going to think about something, and how you're going to feel about it, and what are you deciding? That's what responsibility is.
Right. And that's the whole idea with, taking radical responsibility does not mean that you are to blame, because blame is a different energy altogether.
Totally.
Blame is a very, catabolic level of energy. It's a victim energy where we blame, if we're not blaming someone else, we're blaming ourselves. Responsibility is completely different. That's where we step up and make the decision. It's a conscious decision that we're going to take responsibility. Totally different.
I ran into another Facebooker. These are like my 3 Facebook sessions for the week. And this particular one had posted, I don't remember what her issue was, posted something that wasn't coming to her. And it had to do with a relationship. It had to do with an ex. And I don't remember exactly what the details were. But anyway, it wasn't working out the way she wanted it to. And it was all his fault. And he just wasn't playing his role the way he was supposed to, blah, 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 blah. So I posted something that suggested, well, maybe you might want to look at yourself inside, because you said also this is something that's happened with numerous people, so that kind of indicates a pattern. And the response was something along the lines of, oh, what a mean and hateful thing to say, blaming me for what's going on here. And I thought to myself, wow, boy, is there a misunderstanding about responsibility there?
Well, and the thing is that whatever energy level we are experiencing will prove itself out. And it even proves itself out in our response to people showing us, right? So if someone says, wow, you're just really experiencing a lot of victim energy, and your response is exactly what someone experiencing victim energy would be. You're so mean. How could you say that, right? Because I'm a victim and you're being mean to me, right?
That's right, yeah.
When you get two people in relationship of any kind, and they are, well, this is your fault because you said this to me. And the other person says, yeah, but I wouldn't have done it if you wouldn't have had this. Yeah, well, I did that because you said that. They're vying for victim status.
Yeah. I almost felt like I wasn't playing the role or something. That like I got the wrong script. See,
nobody wants to be the bully. So we always usually vie for victim status. No, it's your fault. You're the bully, not me. Right.
Isn't that an interesting thing? Victim status is safer in the messed up human mind of today.
So it is something, but we're always winning the game we're playing. So
absolutely, we do. Okay.
So let's see if we can get through this chapter. I think we can. I think we can do it. Neville says, I love this phrase he uses now. It's to the pruning shears of revision that we owe our prime fruit. I love the pruning shears of revision. Going back, I think of working in the garden and pruning off all the dead stuff. You have a gardening business, or your wife does. So, you know what that is that you're going out and anything that's not useful or that's kind of growing out into an area we don't want it to grow, we prune that away. And that's exactly what we're doing, what Neville's telling us to do in this revision. This is what this man did as he drove by his rundown property. In his imagination, he got rid of all of those symptoms of the rundown property that he didn't want to see.
Right.
So man and his past are one continuous structure. This structure contains all of the past, which has been conserved and still operates below the threshold of his senses to influence the present and the future of his life. Really powerful paragraph there. That's everything. That's everything in our past. It's still operating below the threshold of our senses, and it influences our presence and our future. That's why we all have areas that are wounded and areas that get triggered because we're carrying all of that with us. He says the whole is carrying all of its contents with it. Any alteration of content will result in an alteration in the present and the future. The first act of correction or cure is always revise. If the past can be recreated into the present, so can the revised past. And thus the revised past appears within the very heart of her present life, not fate, but a revised past brought her good fortune.
It's an interesting thing to talk about all of this stuff, to be a person into law of attraction, to be somebody who is a deliberate creator, and trying to get our heads around how all this works. And then we try some stuff and, well, that didn't quite work. And then we get this feedback. Oh, okay, I have to add this to my understanding. And as that process goes on, I think that's where a lot of the contents that he's talking about comes from. The stuff that we carry around from us. I mean, it's certainly not the only source. There's all the stuff that we went through in our past lives, or earlier on in our lifetimes, rather.
Right.
But we also carry around the stuff as we're trying to learn, the new process. And in the process of doing that, and I think it actually gets stored in our bodies. So our bodies start to absorb this stuff, and we can actually get to a point where we feel like we're stuck. And that happens a lot. We get stuck. We get emotionally stuck on stuff, and then we can't understand why we can't get unstuck. And that's I'm not trying to lead up to a specific point. It's just that struck me when you read that's really part of what Neville was talking about. He didn't necessarily have that in mind when he wrote it, but it certainly fits what he was saying.
It's something that I don't do often enough, but I have been attempting to make it more of a conscious practice that happens more often, and that is in my quiet time, in my time of meditation, sometimes in my time of falling asleep. I actually go back into the past and find myself at a point when I was struggling and tell myself, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about this. And there's this kind of time traveling loop, because can you look back and remember a time when you were really concerned, really worried about something, and then found a place of peace, right? Maybe later that day, maybe the next week, where maybe nothing really outwardly changed, but suddenly you were like, you had that acceptance where you said, okay, you know what? Everything's going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. I always think, you know what that is? That's me right now going back to myself 10 years ago and saying, you're going to do fine.
Why not?
Fine.
Yeah,
and so what I recognize is that the more often I do that now, the more it becomes a habit now, the more my self that's 10 years in the future will be coming back to take care of me right now. That's some good. Really woo-woo stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good. That's actually very similar to what Bill and Alex and I talked about yesterday, because we actually explored the idea, well, if we were going to go back and talk to our younger selves, what would we say to our younger selves?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and we had that conversation. It was a good conversation. I
specifically sometimes will specifically go back to a time that was trouble, back to a time that I was worried, back to a time where I was uncertain, and say, kid, you're doing great and you're going to be fine. Believe me, I know. I'm from the future.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
So Neville says, make results and accomplishment the crucial test of true imagination, and your confidence in the power of imagination to create reality will grow gradually from your experiments with revision, confronted by experience. Only by this process of experiment can you realize the potential power of your awakened and controlled imagination. This is exactly what you were just talking about.
Right.
Is that in the process, we carry that process with us as well.
We do.
So we realize the potential there, and it gets easier and easier.
That's a really key concept. It does get easier and easier. It gets partly because of what you talked about, because there's more and more interaction between future and present, or present and past, depending on how you want to look at it. But also just because, what they say, practice makes perfect. The more you do something, the easier it gets. And that's just as true for this as for anything else. Yeah.
And that's another reason to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And keep going. So many people give up too soon.
Yeah, weren't you talking last week about learning to draw, and you first day you're learning to draw and it's terrible, and then you do it the next day and it's still terrible, and the third day it's getting slightly better, but it's still terrible, and you just keep doing it day after day after day, and then finally at some point you realize, wow, this looks a lot better.
Yeah. So now Neville is quoting from the Christian Bible. We haven't had a lot of that in this book so far.
No.
He says, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. This parable of the unjust steward urges us to mentally falsify the facts of life, to alter a theme already in being. By means of such imaginative falsehoods, a man acquires friends. As each day falls, mentally revise the facts of life and make them conform to events well worthy of recall. Tomorrow we'll take up the altered pattern and go forward until at length it is realized on the heights of attainment. The reader will find it worthwhile to follow these clues. Imaginal construction of scenes implying the wish fulfilled, and imaginative participation in these scenes until tones of reality are reached. We are dealing with the secret of imagining, in which man is seen awakening into a world completely subject to his imaginative power. So I want to go back for a second, this paragraph, these two clues, and think about the story that we read of the person. I think, Walt, you said it was a woman. I didn't see that, but you did.
It's in the introduction to it.
Okay, so the woman on the swing. Imaginal construction of scenes implying the wish fulfilled. So the implication of the wish fulfilled, which was to not have back pain, was the construction of a scene where the accident didn't take place. The accident that caused the resulting back pain.
Right.
And the imaginative participation in these scenes until tones of reality are reached. And I think that's really important to grasp that, because when we look back, even with this letter, this person said that it took several nights or many nights until they could actually feel what it felt like to be a child playing again.
Right.
And of course, this person was reaching back 39 years. So
yeah.
We change a lot in those 39 years. I think they said they were 3 or 4 years old when the accident happened. So sticking with it until, that word in this paragraph, until imaginative participation in these scenes until tones of reality are reached. So stick with it.
And I like the phrase tones of reality. Because tones of reality, I don't know what that evokes for you, but for me, if I'm doing a scene, I usually don't have much detail in my scene anyway, probably because I don't have great vision. My vision's not wonderful, so it's not easy for me to create a mental picture in my mind. But to the degree that I do, I have only very sparse details. And what he's saying is keep going until those details are filling in. That's what those tones of reality are. Those tones of reality are stuff becoming part of the picture in detail in a way that they weren't there before.
what I think, can you see how dark it is? Does it look like I'm sitting in a cave? Because
definitely the storm is affecting your visibility.
Suddenly just got dark as night.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is interesting about this, that Neville uses the word tones, is that when I think of the word tones, I think of music, sounds. And sounds have a vibration.
They do.
A frequency. Tones have a frequency, which is why if you hit a tuning fork, all the instruments in the room will start vibrating on that frequency, right? And so when I saw this tones of reality.
Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Did we lose? I have a feeling we lost Cindy's connection. Well, that's not a good thing. All right. Well, I'm going to try to carry on a little bit with the discussion here until she returns. It looks like she's still connected because we still have a picture of her, but oh my goodness. Well, sorry about that. What does it say? Oh, the storm got her. That's right, Jeff. Jeffrey posted, observing the same thing, the storm got her. Well, hopefully she'll be able to come back on, but if she can't, we'll just kind of try to finish it up ourselves. I'm not sure exactly what her point was that she was making, but where I wanted to go with it was, well, she was talking about the tones of reality as being sound, and that can certainly be true. I would say take it a step further. When you're talking about tones, there are lots of different kinds of tones. There are the audio tones, like she was talking about. There are visual tones, tones of color. Is she coming back? I don't know. No, I guess not. There are tones of touch. I mean, we don't normally tend to use the word tone that way, but touch can have a tonality to it. Flavor, there are tones of flavor. So all five senses, the word tone certainly plays a role. And I think there's also what you might call the sixth sense. There are tones of connection to whatever it is we're trying to connect to, in terms of connecting to our inner selves or connecting to the non-physical world, something along that line. And to the degree that such tones are, what am I trying to say? To the degree that such tones are a part of our experience directly in the present, that's the degree to which we're filling in those tones, and that's the degree to which those tones of reality are reached. So I think Cindy was on the right track there. It's really about filling in the picture, filling it in with tonality of sound, tonality of vision, tonality of touch, tonality of smell, tonality of taste, and the tonality of reaching into our inner selves, to our inner being. And in that process, that's how we end up manifesting. That's how we end up making stuff come into our reality. So looks like that storm really got her, Jeffrey. I don't know what to say other than we're going to try to. I'll try to get some of the last thoughts in here on this particular chapter. Just to kind of, we're supposed to do an hour, so I'll try to fill in as much of the hour as I can. But I want to comment on a couple of things that really struck me about this particular chapter. We've been talking earlier about how this book is his magnum opus. And for me, what that means is he has kind of filled in the tones of reality for his own presentation, for his own ideas. And in so doing, created the magnum opus, created what is really his most complete presentation of what he'd been trying to teach for so many years to his listeners and to his followers, what it amounted to, that presentation that he was making. And in the doing of that, he's really filled in those details. I mean, a lot of the phrasing that we hear in this chapter, we've heard in other books that he wrote and in other talks that he gave. But here it's like they're all being turned into a dance, right? They're all turning into a dance. And in the course of that dance, they are becoming real in our minds. So the law and the promise, now we haven't even gotten to, this book is actually kind of divided into two parts. The first part is more about the law. The second part is more about the promise. We haven't really got to that second part yet. But the law and the promise is really, it's kind of his best example of how to be a complete deliberate creator and how to get past all those little obstacles that we find in our paths that seem to be blocking us or that seem to be getting in the way of us succeeding with what we want to succeed with. And I just want to emphasize that everything that we need to know about how to manifest what we want out of our lives is found in this kind of literature. So it's good stuff. We've got, I think, 1.5 paragraphs left. So let me just read the last paragraph or two and finish up the chapter. He says, the reader will find it worthwhile to follow these clues, these imaginal constructions of scene implying the wish fulfilled, and imaginative participation in these scenes until tones of reality are reached. We are dealing with the secret of imagining, in which man is seen awakening into a world completely subject to his own imaginative power. Man can understand recurrence of events well enough, the building of a world from images supplied by memory, things remaining as they are. This gives him a sense of security in the stability of things. However, the presence within him of a power which awakens and becomes what it wills, radically changing its form, its environment, and the circumstances of life, inspires in him a feeling of insecurity, a dreadful fear of the future. Now, quote, it is high time to awake out of sleep, end quote, and put an end to all the unlovely creations of sleeping man. Revise each day, and, quote, let your strong imagination turn the great wheel backward until Troy unburned. So a couple of quotes from a number of different sources there. This is something we were also kind of touching on before, but I want to reemphasize it. The ability that we have to revise our past events. I mean, we just heard a story about a woman who for 39 plus years was afflicted by a very negative event that happened in her childhood, and she was able to revise it to the point where she could actually heal herself. How cool was that? But it's not just about the past. It's also about revising the near past, or even revising what we want our present to be based on what's happening in our present. And that's something I try to remember every day. Whenever I am doing my morning exercise and my morning meditations and so forth, I'm constantly looking at and revising what it is that I am focusing on and what I'm thinking and feeling about. And in the course of that revision, I basically find myself evolving. It's kind of like my wishes have evolved over time. My desires evolve over time because I'm spending so much time modifying them, changing them, in effect evolving them. Because that's really what revision is all about. We talked earlier about, is this true? Are we telling truth? Are we lying? Are we deceiving? Are we telling a falsehood? That kind of thing. What we're really doing is revising our reality. And in the course of revising that reality, we end up with the reality that's more in line with what it is we want to actually have our reality be. So, cool stuff. I'm sorry that Cindy couldn't finish the chapter, but I'm sure she'll be back with us next week. Just a reminder, Louise and I are actually going away, so we will do the podcast tomorrow morning with Joel Elston and Alex King. Then we hit the road after that. We're going to be gone for a few days to go down to Virginia to attend my mom's memorial service. Thanks to those of you who sent your well wishes in. We will be back on late Tuesday, so we'll probably miss the Tuesday podcast. That means the next podcast that we will do after tomorrow morning's show will be next Neville Day, next Wednesday, when we go on to chapter 4 of The Law and the Promise. So thank you very much for tuning in. We're sorry that Cindy got knocked out, but you can count on the fact that she will be back next time. And we'll, of course, by the way, anybody who wants to reach out to her, feel free to contact her through her website, cindychavez.com. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. And thank you very much to our listeners, our live streamers. Thank you, Jeffrey, for sticking with us through all this. Thank you to our podcast listeners as well. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.